Sam versus Sam. My name's Sam. We're going to be going over Sam Sulek's diet, I guess his full day of eating. I've actually never followed Sam Sulek until about 3 days ago, and I see a lot of his stuff being reposted on TikTok, and so I actually got to understand Sam Sulek's content through TikTok, and I just went over to his YouTube, and I didn't know he did full days of eating. I am a nutritionist. I'm also in school trying to finish up my dietitian's degree. Shout out to my student loans. Let's get this paid off. But as a nutritionist, I will be going over Sam Sulek's, I guess, nutritional education, see what we could pull from it, and see what's happening.
Don't just skip over that. That's the absolute worst mistake you could do. In a bulking context, it's not bad, right? Because of course, you'd be eating more food than you're really tracking. But if you're trying to diet down, you've got to be OCD Mr. Monk level. Like any amount of ketchup you get, that's 3 grams of carbs. Any amount of extra oil you put in the pan when you made some eggs, that's 5 grams of fat. When it comes to my dieting, not style, but maybe theory, if you could call it that, calories is the number one factor, right? Because you got to remember, I could eat as...
All right, this is really good. We're off to a great start. Sam understands that the famous saying of calories are king. When you are tracking calories, especially when you are in a caloric deficit, it is of vital importance that you are tracking those very small calories because they add up. And if you understand kind of like the basic concept, the 449 rule, protein and carbs is 4 calories per gram. And then the 9 comes from fats. For 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So those add up, especially, you may not think of it from a daily basis, but in a week, you're not tracking those very small. They do add up at the end of the week. And especially in a month's time, those smaller grams could actually stop you from losing that half a pound, that pound or 2 pounds. So if you're staying on a metric, it's very important to keep note of the condiments that you're using. Even in like 0-calorie monsters, there's still 6 grams of carbohydrates in there. So those are very small things to understand, and Sam understands it.
Perfect food as I want, train as hard as I want for years on end. But if I don't eat enough calories to be in a calorie surplus and actually deposit, mass, but primarily muscle onto my frame, I'm not going to get anywhere. I mean, I'll look like a freak, but I'll still be like 220. The only way to actually gain weight is to eat calories in excess of what your body is burning per day. And vice versa is apparently a hard truth. And from some like TikTok freak out videos I see, apparently it's a argued truth. But the only way to lose body fat, again, same thing, but in reverse, you have to eat less calories than your body burns per day, aka a calorie deficit. But apart from that, I'm really trying to get in tons of carbs, my 250 grams of protein-ish. I kind of stay around a gram per pound, right? So right now I'm at 250. I'm going to eat 250 grams. If you're $160, go for $160. If you do 200 at that weight, or if you did 100 at that weight, I don't think it's going to change anything too much. But good rule of thumb, I'd say gram per pound is where you're at.
All right, I would advocate for a higher amount of protein intake, especially when you're bulking. Carbohydrates serve a purpose for energy production, ATP production. Fats serve a purpose for hormonal production, hormonal control, and protein serves the purpose of accumulating new contractile muscle tissue. When you're dieting down and when you're trying to gain weight, you would want to stick with a little bit higher, more of a protein, more so on the side if you're gaining weight. Let's say you're eating the same amount of protein as your body weight. You weigh 250 and you're eating 250 grams of protein. That protein is stabilizing the muscle tissue that you currently already have. Whereas if you are working, gaining weight, trying to gain new contractile muscle tissue, you would need an influx, right? So it's kind of like, hey, if I'm going to be driving this car a long distance, I want to make sure I have enough gas in the car. And you don't have to get too crazy with it. It doesn't have to be an astronomical amount of protein that you're ingesting. You could do a safe route. A really good route is 1.3 grams per 1 pound of body weight, right? So if I have a subject that's 250 pounds, I would shoot for 270 grams of protein, 280 grams of protein. There's nothing even wrong with 290 grams of protein. From a storage mechanism, when you eat carbohydrates, you store it as glycogen inside the muscle tissue, which provides energy. When you eat fat, it gets turned into triglycerides as fat cells, right? Which helps your cholesterol. When you eat too much protein, it has no storage mechanism. Even if let's say you only ate protein and it was a crazy amount of protein, a surplus amount of protein, some of that is definitely going to be turned into fat because, again, calories are king. An understandable point is that you do not have a storage mechanism for protein. So protein either gets utilized or it gets excreted through bowel movements or urine, which could be accumulated through a lot of nitrogen, through your nitrogen balance. And then that's when you want to look out for foamy urine. But that's also why protein timing is very important. Again, protein timing is in relation with no storage mechanism for protein. So it's one of those things where I don't want to say you either use it or you lose it, but it is one of those things. And then also, again, when it does come to protein, a majority of your protein is going to be going towards your vital major organs, right? Your body's priority is not building muscle tissue. It doesn't want to do that. Your body's priority is sustaining vital major organs for your brain, heart, liver, kidneys, all of these things that keep us alive. So you got to understand a majority of that protein that you're eating, let's say you eat 30 grams of protein, by the time it gets past your stomach acid of hydrochloric acid and pepsin, and it gets to your small intestine for absorption, your body's only going to be absorbing around like 27 grams of that. And then that 27 grams is going to be diverted towards major organs for healing and survival. And then what is ever left over will be going towards new contractile muscle tissue or muscle healing. That's something that you need to keep in mind, again, and it gives a little bit more source to why you should be eating a little bit more protein than just the 1 gram per pound of body weight.
In terms of fats, it kind of fluctuates. Maybe a fourth of that. So usually my fats are around, well, the bulking gets a little funky. Whatever. I don't really have a specific fat goal I'm aiming for. Bulking days, I'll get up in the 150s. But carbs, I did a whole rant in the drive back from the gym last night.
Side note, if you are bulking, I would keep your fats the same. I wouldn't go out of control with your fats because, again, when you're consuming too many fats, your body will be storing them, and that's when cholesterol starts to go up a little bit more. It does differentiate between whether you're natural and enhanced, but even when you're gaining weight or losing weight or maintaining weight, ideally you want to keep your fats the same, and you may need to adjust those with certain circumstances or health factors, but keeping your fats the same helps a little bit more with hormonal regulation.
About how carbs are totally going to change the way my workouts and pumps feel. So that's what I'm really trying to push. So today, by the end of it, I should be about at 800-ish grams of carbs. So good start with 120, and then I have to add, of course, anytime you're eating anything, at least as often as you can, food scale is going to come in crazy fucking handy.
So with 800 grams of carbs, there's nothing wrong with that. When it does come to that, it's genetic dependent, it's muscle accumulation dependent, right? So the more muscle you have, the more glycogen storage is that you're able to fill up, right? The bigger the person, the more muscle, there's more glycogen that can be consumed to inflate that muscle tissue. So if you have a very dense muscular guy, they're going to be able to eat a lot more food than the less muscular guy. When you see these guys do huge cheat meals or everyday eating and stuff like that, it is not always in the same ballpark as your physique. So if you're watching bodybuilders eat a crap ton of food, 4,500 calories, and you're a smaller guy, if you're 2-3 years into, weightlifting, you're probably not going to be able to eat that much food to inflate that muscle tissue.
But let's pour on, 3 cups of milk or so. That'd be 720 grams. Perfect. So 3 servings.
When it comes to milk, I'm not that huge of a fan of it. Can you do it? Absolutely, you totally can. Is it an easier way to get your protein in? Absolutely. There is certain things though that you want to look out for. When we're babies, we have the enzyme lactase. Lactase is an enzyme to break down lactose that's in dairy products. It's one of those things, the older you get, the less likelihood you still have that enzyme of lactase to break down lactose. And I think it's like 70% of the population. I could be totally wrong on that, but I think it's around 70% of the people lose that digestive enzyme, which is why you have lactose intolerant people. Lactose intolerant people don't have the enzyme of lactase to break down dairy to pass it through the system efficiently, which is why you get bubble guts and stuff like that. I would be really interested to understand, this is TMI, but I would be interested to see how his bowel movements are pertaining towards like, dude, are you blowing up the bathroom or are you not? Like, you're ingesting so much milk. But, you know, if it works for people and they don't have any issues, totally go for it. It works for a lot of individuals. Some so, maybe not others.
That puts me about 170 grams of carbs, 25 grams of protein, and about 25 grams of fat for this whole bowl. So that's however many calories. I'll do the math in the end. I'll add like a counter. Like, it was kind of confusing a little bit last time. So each meal, I'll just write out the macros. And then at the end of the day, I'll write out the total. So I'll just sit here for, I don't know, 5 minutes, however long it takes me to get this down, and then go do cardio. So this is the pre-cardio meal.
Oh.
Fasted, it's not going to make a fucking difference.
It doesn't.
And if you're bulking, I think a big breakfast, or at least a moderately sized breakfast, is going to make it a bit easier. Because you got to remember, if you do no breakfast, and like let's say you're going to school, so you don't eat anything until lunch, then that means you've only got from lunch till whenever you go to sleep.
Yeah.
That's your window to eat. Whereas the dude who had a big ass breakfast, his window is going to be the complete day. So let's just jump to whatever.
So that's basic concept. I think a lot of people could understand that. It's just getting enough food in before you go to sleep at the end of the night. You don't want to cram in a bunch of food before workouts. You don't want to cram in a bunch of food before you go to sleep. I would emphasize protein timing is more so on the important side than your carbs and fats. So even for you, if you're super busy, getting protein shakes in, having meals with just protein with like beef jerky or yogurt on the side is perfectly fine.
This will pretty much be the pre-workout meal. This is one I've kind of been loving. So obviously, I actually go out of my way, cook steak. Usually I'm kind of lazy. I like getting a lot of pre-made food, like a Costco huge 15-pound turkey breast, and just cut chunks off. But the steaks I've been loving. So about a pound of steak, 100 grams of protein. I'd usually just do one of these, like 8 ounces. But since breakfast was kind of lower on protein, I'll just double up. And then a pre-made kind of, I forget the brand, but it's like a 5-serving thing of mashed potatoes.
Side note, if you want to track your food a little bit more accurately, I would drop it down to counting your food in grams rather than in ounces. Ounces is kind of more of a rounded estimate towards grams, but grams is a lot more efficient. Steak, I'm totally for. Mashed potatoes, I'm totally for. Potatoes are going to give you great source of potassium and vitamin C. Steak is going to give you amazing micronutrients with all your B vitamins and iron. Very important to have those on a daily basis, in my opinion. Having it as a pre-workout meal, I don't know about that. I would stick to more of an easily digestible food with a healthier fat, with a monounsaturated fat, which are heart healthy fats. Potatoes you could definitely do as a pre-workout. The pre-packaged mashed potatoes, that's probably lathered in butter. Maybe it has some oil in it. You're getting a lot more fat accumulation on the saturated fat side of things. So this is one thing that you want to be conscious about if you are enhanced. If you're an enhanced individual, you need to be very particular about your food choices when it comes to your fats, staying away from trans fats and only having those saturated fats come from red meat. You don't want those bad fats like trans and saturated fats, because that's what causes LDL corruption in your arteries. And then when you go do blood work and your blood work's already bad from being in enhanced individual, trans fat and saturated fat, the butter, the oil, those cause more issues with your arteries and LDL when you do go get biochemical markers, labs drawn. So that's one thing that you want to be very cautious about being an enhanced individual. Eating like that, eating a bunch of trans and saturated fat is going to show up on your blood work, and that's going to give you kind of an alarming situation where you're like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. You know, if you do care and you get biochemical markers drawn, you need to be very cautious about your fat intake and only stick with monounsaturated fats that come from avocado, comes from egg yolk, almonds, peanut butters. Those are very important heart healthy fats that help with your HDL, high density lipoproteins.
So all this adds up. I already tracked it on my phone. I'm going to have to pull it back up. But 100 grams of protein, 20-ish grams of fat, maybe a little more with all the avocado oil I cooked it in. And then this is going to be about 90 grams of carbs, maybe 14 grams of fat, if I remember right. But, you know, that's about right. So
I think you had chocolate bars in there too.
I've never really been a huge proponent of really hitting meals per se. That's one factor which I kind of differentiate in terms of my, let's just call it rich piana similarities. Because calories are calories, dude. You can't eat something and have it not count. That's one thing that I think people really kind of have to understand. Like, if you're dieting and you're like, okay, I'm going to have this as a treat. Or even worse, let's say you're not really doing a strict diet. You're just kind of a layman kind of character. And you get what I'm saying. You're not crazy invested. And you're like, yeah, I'll have a salad for lunch. Yeah, I'll just have a couple eggs for breakfast. Right? In your mind, you're like, I did good today. And then it's 8 o'clock. You eat a bunch of pizza that was in the fridge left over, a couple scoops of ice cream.
That's a good point. I'm glad he's talking about this. This is actually like, if you take an intro nutrition course like in college, you are going to learn about food addiction, food eating disorders. This actually falls in line with that. It's called a feast and famine food disorder. And a lot of people don't really think about it. And I think a lot of people actually do. Like, even with my coaching, I notice a lot of people do this, where you'll be super hardcore Monday through Friday. And then it's usually at a social event, but sometimes people will do it solo by themselves. That's when you go out or you stay at home and you just feast, right? So Monday through Friday, you do a famine. Then on the weekends or one night out of the week, you do a feast, and it totally snowballs your diet. It destroys your diet. It is something to be very conscious of and have a healthy relationship with your diet and with your food. That way you're avoiding the snowball effect and you're avoiding the binge eating effect. I'm glad he talked about this. It's pretty important, actually.
That just 1 hour of snacking before you go to bed will completely offset all the quote unquote good that you did that day. So that's kind of why I sort of took a bit of an anal kind of stance about tracking every kind of calorie. So in a way, this is almost, if you wanted to call it that, you could say meal 3. But after cardio, I stopped in the vending machine at the gym. 2 things of juice, 60 grams of carbs total, followed by 2 big-ass crunch bars, 400 calories total. So that puts me at whatever I'm at now.
So with the juice, a cool thing that you utilize, especially when you're bulking, I've done this with clients. Again, you could switch over to like dextrose, a powdered carbohydrate supplement. And also you could even do regular Gatorades that have calories in, which is also beneficial for just getting those added calories in. If I have a subject who's a hard gainer and it is so difficult for them to get in food, even with certain females that just there's certain individuals that don't like to eat as much food, we go towards a liquid calorie source. Gatorades are awesome. Powdered carbohydrates are awesome supplement as well. And those are things you could do if you're like just full. If it is so hard to get in food at that point, getting liquid calories in can really aid in your ability to gain weight, feel performance in the gym, and start to get those scale metrics that you want when you're looking in the mirror.
But in a way, it kind of is. I mean, it's a super easy, like pretty much 500 calories, just like that. So I might save that for later. Like once 5,000 or so calories gets a little bit more difficult, or let's say not difficult, but it becomes my new baseline, then adding that big shake post-workout, that'll definitely put me over the edge back into, maintaining growth. So I kind of jumped the gun a little bit while the water was boiling for the ramen. I was already picking at the flank steak that my dad made earlier. So basic premise, 12 ounces of flank steak, 2 packs of chicken ramen. So
all right, flank steak is amazing. Especially if you're a bodybuilder, you want to stick with your lean sources of red meat. That way, again, you're avoiding saturated fat content, getting more protein out of the food that you're consuming with red meat. The ramen, that would be a big no for me because, again, you're not getting in vital micronutrients. Whether you're in a caloric deficit or a caloric surplus, you need to understand micronutrient control. And that is being able to hit, people get very consumed with macros. How many calories am I eating? Calories are king, like I just said. Sam understands it. One thing that you want to be on the lookout for is micronutrient deficiencies or overconsumption of certain micronutrients. Micronutrients, if you pay close attention, it'll prevent you a lot more from getting illness, sickness, running into weird biochemical markers, lab work. It's going to help you grow more. It's going to help you sleep more. It's going to basically make you perform better in every level of your life. Micronutrients are the most vital, important thing. Micronutrients should be superseded before macros. Even in nutrition assessment and anthropometric measures, again, in college courses, you're going to understand how important micronutrients are for your diet. I could go on and on about this, but this video is going to be crazy long if I do that. But I would be concerned about Sam's micronutrient profile. You know, if he's logging that in MyFitnessPal, it's going to pop up a lot of his food. But even controlling sodium is a major factor, especially if you're a bodybuilder. Sodium is a prime driver for pumps in the workout, but overconsumption of sodium may cause cardiovascular issues, especially with you being enhanced. So that's another factor I would worry about. If I was coaching Sam, I would be very concerned about his sodium intake, his magnesium intake, just supplementation intake. He may have a video on that. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. But sodium is very important to know if he's like salting his meals or not. And the ramen, I just wouldn't do that just because there's better choices. I would rather have him do steak and oats. You know, fiber is a huge factor too. With consumption of red meat mixed with fiber, you get a better health profile when it comes to your dieting and nutrition. If you're just eating a lot of red meat without that fiber intake, you start to slide over into the cardiovascular disease risk. And because fiber does help pull LDL out of the system, those low density lipoproteins, that bad cholesterol, fiber helps with that. So it's important to have a controlled amount of fiber with whatever diet that you're doing, because you also want to have healthy bowel movements. You also want to have a controlled colon, and those factors. I wouldn't do the ramen, buddy.
100-ish grams of carbs right here, 14 of fat, 75 grams of protein, and about, I think I said 10. I might actually go back and then change it. It's probably more like at least 17 grams of fat. So I'll add that up and put it wherever. But not a lot of crazy treats today. Though, when it comes to the actual kinds of foods that I'm eating, for the most part, I do look at it as calories in, calories out, right? How many carbs are in it, how many fats are in it, how much protein is in it. But protein is a little different. I do definitely put a lot of emphasis on making sure that the 250 grams of protein that I'm getting in per day is from a high quality source. You know, you can look this up. It's I forget the exact term, but it's like the protein grading scale. So it's basically 0 to 100, right? 100 obviously being the best, 0 being the worst. And historically, I've kind of had a habit of not really tracking protein from, you know, breads, really just any kind of non-protein source. Like it said, there's like 8 grams of protein in this ramen. From what? From the rice? Look, it's not like it's not nothing. And in a dieting context, you do need to take that into account, since the proteins are going to count as calories. It is going to count as energy towards your total consumption for the day. But in a bulking context, I want to make sure that every gram of the 250 I'm getting is from, you know, pretty much up in that 90 range. And that's where you're going to see.
Okay, this is a really good talking point. And I actually don't hear it get talked about a lot. It's like a protein index, right? Sam's kind of talking about the scale of high quality protein and low quality protein. When you're looking at protein, the main amino acid you want to look at is leucine. Protein powder, very high in leucine. Leucine is the main driver for muscle tissue healing, recovery, and growth. So you want to make sure that your protein sources have a good amount of leucine in it. Basically, all of your animal products, which is why animal products are usually top tier when it comes to your protein choices. Now, he's talking about like if there's protein in bread, that's not a good source of protein, or you don't want to count that protein because it doesn't have all of the amino acids in it. It doesn't have that leucine in it, which is very, very good that he understands that. It's a very good talking point. Again, I don't hear people actually talking about like protein context. Let's use a vegan for an example, right? A vegan will use vegan protein. People think vegan protein is amazing and it's good, when vegan protein, depending on where it is sourced from, is usually missing leucine. You're going to have to combine protein powders if you're a vegan to match the amino acid profile of protein. If you're a vegan, you need to combine hemp protein with potato protein, and that's going to give you all of your amino acids to help you healing with recovering and building muscle from protein sources. I'm happy he talked about that because I don't get to talk about that enough. Counting protein with efficient protein, I should say, from animal products or protein powders or dairy products is very, very important. You don't want to count all your protein from beans and rice and lentils, like those things, you know, because that's gonna really, really set you back if you're counting protein from that. You're eating 200 grams of protein, 30 grams of that is coming from lentils or a grain of some source. That's not efficient protein. That's kind of like what he's saying that in a nutshell.
I haven't looked at it for a while, but it's chicken, milk, steak, fish, eggs. What else am I missing? Yeah, probably other, animal products, animal meats, right? Shit like that. And as you go lower on the scale, you're going to start to see more vegetable proteins, soys, whatnots, wheat proteins, barley proteins, like things along those lines. And that's why I'm not going to really count the protein in bread or the protein in, I'm trying to think what else. I don't know, whatever, right? The protein in that bowl of cereal I had for breakfast, it says 3 grams of protein per serving. Come on, let's be real. You want proteins with a complete amino acid array, right? Everybody's heard the term complete protein thrown around. So that's, best case scenario, that's in the meats. So any vegetarians or vegans, even worse, not in terms of ethics or values, but in terms of getting a really complete amino acid array, you are at a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm not going to say it's not good to do your soy proteins or whatever. I'm not saying if you eat tofu, it's going to spike your estrogen. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But I feel like it's a little bit of not a roadblock, but a little bit more of a hassle if that's your deal, if that's what you're working around for your diet.
All right, I thought he was going to be eating a lot more food. Maybe he is and he didn't show it, or there's other food videos. Overall, it's not super harsh. It's not that bad. The only thing I would probably tell him not to eat would be the ramen and just switch to a better source of food like oats or more potatoes, cream of wheat, just things like that. His diet overall is pretty good. A few factors you got to understand with Sam is that he's got elite genetics. He is enhanced, which helps food consumption a lot. But other than that, it's a pretty good diet. A few things that I would want to look at would be biochemical markers, the micronutrients, regulation on bowel movements, and his water intake. Controlling sodium, potassium, fiber, magnesium, factors to really look at to be able to take care of your health when you're doing things like this, especially getting really, really big or packing on muscle as much as you can. You really want to pay close attention to health markers. Overall, not that bad. I hope you enjoyed this Sam on Sam action. That was weird. Until the next video, guys, I'll see you later.